And what makes you suspect of Keir Starmer personally?
Starmer himself is a man of very interesting background. I think his struggles over what I find actually the rather dull subject of the transgender issue are interesting. The reason why he struggles over it is because he is, by inclination and politics for a long time, a person of the very, very far left. He was mixed up with a tendency called Pabloism in his 20s, which is an outward branch of Trotskyism, named after a man whose nom de guerre was Pablo, who's really a Greek revolutionary called Michalis Raptis, who decided that the old form of revolutionary socialism was clapped out, in which he was absolutely right, and the seizure of the post office and the barracks by the working class, that wasn't going to happen. But the revolutionaries should concentrate on two things, the red and the green. The red being the cultural, moral, and revolution, sort of Gramscian takeover of society in every corner. And the green bit, of course, the fanatical and zealous pursuit of net zero and similar targets. And the red bit is, of course, sexual politics, amongst other things. And Starmer, I think, recognizes and has had difficulty over this because he really believes this stuff.
Do you? Or do you think
people, when Starmer in that first debate said, he was asked whether if a relative was suffering on the NHS waiting list, would he go private? He said no. Mm-hmm. People thought he was making it up or pretending. I absolutely believe him. He was an extremely dogmatic person. The other very interesting thing was when he was finally asked a political question interview a week or so ago. Nick Ferrari asked him, when he kept on referring to working people and they wouldn't face any more taxes, who did he mean by working people? And he said, in effect, I won't try and quote exactly, but what the effect of what he said was that the people he does not regard as working people are people with savings. Now, there are many, many people in this country who are not particularly well off, who do have savings and who have managed to accumulate assets. They will all, I think, face very strong egalitarian taxation in one form or another under this government. There are other things about Starmer's policy which are fascinating. The Daily Mail the other day revealed that he'd been on a trip, a work camp trip to Czechoslovakia, deep in the deep frozen years of communism in 1986. This is in the period when people like Václav Havel were being thrown into jail, when Charter 77 supporters were trying very hard to draw attention to the complete lack of freedom of speech, when anybody who opposed the communist regime in Czechoslovakia was either put into prison or driven from his profession and made to work in menial tasks. It was a miserable Cold War time, and yet he went on this work camp. He was also, when he was a lawyer, a young lawyer in 1980s, secretary of a body called the Haldane Society of Socialist Lawyers. Now, there are lots of things I could say about that, but I won't say any more than this. The Haldane Society was the result of a split among left-wing lawyers in London in the 1940s, a split largely between sympathizers of the Soviet Union and non-sympathizers of the Soviet Union, in which the Haldane Society was the society of choice for those who were more inclined towards sympathy for the Soviet Union, and the Society of Labour Lawyers was the Society of Labour Lawyers, of normal Labour Party members who were also lawyers. No one who was a left-wing lawyer in London in the 1980s could not have known about this distinction. I have particular reasons for knowing about it, but no one, Keir Starmer could not have known, could not have been unaware that there was this distinction, yet he was secretary of the Haldane Society rather than a member of the Society for Labour Lawyers. You have to ask why. I think that he's a man of the pretty strong, hard left, probably wealthy left of Jeremy Corbyn, in a modern and, as said, partly Gramscian way, which is incomprehensible to most people who write about politics in this country, because most people who write about politics in this country are politically illiterate, particularly about the left, and don't understand its language. Or its
perhaps I'm certain that we are two of them, so explain it to us. Because the public perception is that Keir Starmer is this centrist figure who's taken on the extremes of his own party, who's got rid of Jeremy Corbyn,
Yep.
He's got rid of Diane Abbott, who's got rid of all this far-left progressive fringe, and he's the centre-left, moderate, centrist dad. Why is that wrong?
There is an old, almost sentimentally lovable old left, steam-powered old Trotskyist like Jeremy Corbyn, and open, sort of rather noisy, very sincere leftists like Diane Abbott, people of that kind, who are no threat to anybody because you can see them coming about 30 miles off. And there is the subtle, smooth left, which became Blairism, the left of Eurocommunism, the crucial year in all this being 1968, when two things happened. One, the Soviet Union and its allies invaded Czechoslovakia and horrified almost everybody on the serious left who had up till then had any sympathy with the Soviet Union, and broke probably forever that connection. So there was particularly in the Italian Communist Party a movement towards some form of serious leftism, which was no longer Soviet, no longer believed in the complete takeover of industry and the economy by the state, which looked back to Antonio Gramsci, who was an Italian communist who'd seen in the 20s that Soviet socialism wouldn't work. And at the same time, you had this 1968 events in Paris, which were largely about sex. They began with a quarrel about male access to female dormitories at the Nanterre branch of the University of Paris. And that's what they were about: sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And if you go and look at all there's the museums of all those posters that were stuck up at the time, it's quite clear that's what it's about. Those two channels of thought came together into a current called Eurocommunism, which took over the theoretical journal of the British Communist Party, Marxism Today, which became actually the theoretical journal of New Labour. And if you look at New Labour's front ranks, and this is only because you're limited in knowing anything about this because all you know is what's come out. Much more may well exist which doesn't come out. An extraordinary number of Blair's cabinet colleagues had been Marxists of one kind or another during the 1960s and 1970s. Blair himself, and this was concealed during his entire time as leader of the Labour Party, Blair himself was a Trotskyist at Oxford University. And people don't necessarily stop being revolutionaries because they stop running around going on demonstrations or believing the working class is about to take over. What happened to the revolutionaries of the 60s was they refined and sophisticated their politics and sought as I say, a moral, cultural and social revolution by other means, and began a long march through the institutions which bore fruit in the 1990s and is still with us.
Peter, do you not think...
I understand this because I was so very nearly in it.
Oh, no, of course.
I was there. I was myself a revolutionary Marxist in the late 60s and 1970s, and I broke quite bitterly with my former comrades, and I make it public. Anyone who asks me, I'll tell them all about it. You know, when I joined, where I joined, what I did, and all the rest of it. They don't. Not one of these people who rose to cabinet rank in the Blair government has ever sat down and discussed in detail what it was that they did.
And why have the right-wing newspapers and media not exposed this?
Because they don't understand it. And I do. Actually, if you don't have any understanding of Marxism and Leninism, you're completely at a loss for understanding modern European politics.
So,
and a lot of, for instance, someone like Daniel Cohn-Bendit, who ended up as Euro MP, the currents which began in 1968 Paris, and the May events of people throwing cobblestones at the gendarmerie, ended up, in many cases, deep in the institutions of the European Union. One of the main founders of the European project was an Italian communist called Altiero Spinelli. You don't know this. But if you are an ex-Trotskyist, you do know, because you can read the signs and you understand the code. It's all there. These things are, this is a left-wing project which we face.